Jaime, 27 years in marketing.
I worked for Charle, Furniture Land FatFace,
Monsoon, Accessorize, working with some of the biggest brands that we know. So where did it all begin?
I kind of fell into it.
Won't be the first to say it, but you've worked with some big brands, right?
Yeah.
But they can be slow, right? Big companies are notorious for being slow.
I kind of did a little bit of a sneaky and did an under-the-radar proof of concept. We were doing it for the right reasons.
Jaime, do you think big brands actually care?
You can't afford to lose customers.
Historically, we've learned that customers don't do their due diligence.
Jaime, what is your biggest failure over the last 27 years?
I can tell you about a squeaky bum moment.
Not every decision's the right decision. You've got to fail to succeed.
Fuck, everything is going to shit right now. Welcome to episode 8 of CharleChats, the Ecommerce Podcast. My name's Nick, I'm the founder of Charle, a Shopify agency here in London, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our home for some very open, honest, and real conversations with some absolute A players in e-commerce right now. So, without further ado, let's do this. Jaime, 27 years in marketing, working with some of the biggest brands that we know. What led you to e-commerce?
I kind of fell into it. Hadn't planned to do it from college or anything. In fact, I was going to go to university to do physiotherapy. And then out of college, didn't go to uni as planned. Just went and got an admin job working at Whitelink. The opportunity came up to give it a try. And that was it, really. Just kind of, and as the years have gone by, just taught myself new skills, learnt new stuff as I've gone along, and here I am.
So where did it all begin? This amazing 27-year career in marketing and e-com.
Yeah.
What was the first step into the marketing world?
So I was at Whitelink, and they said, "Oh, we're trying to hire someone, can't find anybody. Do you want to give it a shot?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." And I was just doing kind of sponsorship, PR, press, some of their kind of timetable brochures and stuff. And really enjoyed it, and just gone from there, really.
Do you know what? It's so funny. I've speaking to loads of people in e-com and founders. The amount of people that just kind of fall into e-commerce. And I have a lot of theories on this. I think one of them is because e-commerce is such a new movement. It's not had hundreds and hundreds of years of it becoming established. But actually, I think it's such an industry of having to change all the time that I think it attracts a certain person, because there must be a reason why. I mean, I pretty much fell into e-commerce as well.
Equally, yeah.
I was a paramedic before I did this. I don't know how that relates, but here we are. So kind of as your career progressed, what would you say was your kind of first more leadership or higher role within marketing, and what was the brand?
I think probably on a larger scale, maybe Avis. So essentially I was working on all the kind of planning for the year. So I would sit down with all the heads of department, work out, budget requirements, what our targets were going to be, how we were going to get there. Obviously, presenting that to kind of CEO and CFO. And I also managed the trading team there as well. So all the websites across Avis and budget. So that was 12 people across the EMEA region.
And what was that role, sorry?
That was a senior planning manager at Avis
Nice.
Budget. Yeah.
And was that probably the closest first role into the e-commerce world, do you think?
No, I'd been working in it before then, but that was probably the one where I was working more across the whole of e-commerce, marketing, digital, and sort of acquisition retention as well. So, and then kind of deep dive into the analytics and planning as well. So.
They're always such big roles, aren't they?
That was, yeah. I mean, I kind of started on a contract. It was only supposed to be for 6 months, covering someone on sabbatical. She decided to extend, so I got extended. And then she came back into a different role, which actually better suited her skills. Mm-hmm. And they asked me to stay permanent. So, I did for a while.
Amazing.
It was good. Good team.
What's some of the other brands that you've worked with that people at home would really recognise?
Yeah, I worked for Charle, which obviously is a bit controversial at the moment, but I was working on the recruitment marketing side.
Fine.
So working with some of their partners like RigZone, doing some firsts actually for Charle, so virtual recruitment fair, which that was interesting. I spent kind of 6 weeks at home working on that. And then because people kind of ducked out for various reasons, I literally was kind of logged on from 4 o'clock in the morning till about 10 o'clock at night on a follow the sun, because we started with sort of Singapore and Australia, and then obviously came through, you know, kind of Asia, Europe, and then onto the US. So, and it was, I got some really good feedback from that because it was a real success. Generated a lot of leads, both experienced people and grads as well. And then I did a few kind of webinars which I'd never done before as well, which they went really well, and again got some really good feedback and lots of engagement from actually people that had joined as well. So it was a good bunch there, really nice bunch of people from kind of different backgrounds and stuff, and different cultures as well, which is good.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty
So
mad.
it sounds like heaps of marketing experience in diverse roles.
Yep.
Throughout your career, and then more recently heading up e-commerce specifically for people like Monsoon, Accessorize, Furniture Land. So when was that like real transition from the marketing world? Because it is a different world, isn't it?
Who was the first brand into ecom?
God, I genuinely can't even remember now. I mean, obviously I did some of it at Avis with the trading of the websites. I'm pretty sure there must have been somebody before that.
That memorable.
Unfortunately, I've worked at a lot of places through kind of contracting and perm roles. So, it all kind of ties together really, because obviously, you know, you attract people through your marketing and also retain them through that. But you know, you've got to have some kind of messaging and to an extent a little bit of marketing on the website as well, because, you know, you've got to push them over that sort of ledge to make the decision and buy something. So, it is all kind of linked. It's not completely separate worlds.
Yeah, it's very true.
Or
It's
it
very
shouldn't
true.
be.
No, it often is. Sometimes you have very separate, even with some of our clients now, sometimes like e-com can be like a separate team to marketing, and then it can sometimes, like you said, it should be linked, because really
and that's the danger, because sometimes, you know, one team will go off and do one thing and then you're doing something else somewhere else, and there's no consistency of messaging or experience for the customer. And certainly now, that's dangerous, because, you know, you can easily lose a customer like that with one, you know, minor mistake. They'll take their money somewhere else. You know, I think people will still pay a little bit more for a great experience.
100%.
And that starts with the marketing. You know, it might end with e-commerce potentially, or, you know, your kind of retention marketing. But yeah, it's a funny place out there right now.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, I won't be the first to say it, but you've worked with some big brands, right?
Yep.
Some massive teams. We've had startups on this podcast. We've had some really big companies too.
Yep.
But they can be slow, right? Big companies are notorious for being slow with like boards to get through, board approval, many levels of hierarchy, of sign-offs and things. What's your kind of... Do you have any pain points or big issues with the speed that big companies work out, or things that you think that they can do really, really well? I'd love to kind of dive into your brain and understand that big business world.
It's funny because, I mean, there have been some big companies I've worked for that have had less red tape than others. I think it kind of depends maybe on the industry and actually the team that you're working with. But so I think some of it comes down to understanding, you know, of what you're trying to do. So a recent example, we're trying to get Content Square in, and the kind of top level CEO and stuff didn't really understand it. So I kind of did a little bit of a sneaky and did an under the radar proof of concept, free. There was no charge, so, you know, it wasn't going to cost us anything. I mean, it didn't even cost us any resource because it was a quick kind of 10-minute job to put the tag on the site. And, you know, being able to present back the power of our data and potential revenue that we could get back, the impact it could have on improving the customer experience, it actually really resonated. And before that, we were really struggling to actually get some traction. So I wouldn't necessarily advocate for being sneaky, but in this case, obviously, we were doing it for the right reasons. And as I say, it wasn't going to cost us money or time and resource. So it worked out really well. But sometimes you have to kind of do those, MVPs, like proof of concepts, just to kind of get a bit more traction and understanding, and then kind of get the buying a bit more. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as the way to go always. But,
So if you were kind of to speak to e-com managers who maybe have been heavily involved within the startup world effectively, or much smaller teams, is there any kind of advice or insights that you think that what to expect if you're about to join a, 500 employee plus business size, for example?
It obviously depends on the type of company and how they're kind of set up. But things might move a bit slower. There might be a few more stages of sign off. You might not just be able to go off and do something. You might have to get approvals, but you can usually still get it done if it's going to bring, if you can get a solid business case, it's going to bring this much money into the business, or it's going to improve the customer experience, or obviously revenue is always going to be the big thing, but if you've got that solid business case based on those things, then generally it will get signed off. Obviously it depends on kind of what budgets are like and how risk averse the business is, but I
think it's interesting because even we see real diverse levels of brands that work with us, in terms of some of them are like, roll everything out as quickly as we can, fail fast. It might not be perfect, but at least we can learn. But then we have other brands that are much slower movers, that are maybe kind of way more planning, and actually you can look back over a quarter and go, God, blimey, we're still not over the line on this yet.
That can be frustrating.
Yeah, Ben, you head up our membership team, and you obviously get real first-hand view on. Got a little Monty joining us. Get a first-hand view on the speed of rollout. What have you got any kind of views there?
Yeah, I think naturally what we've seen and what we're trying to push is split testing almost everything we can, to ensure you have data to back that up. As Jaime, you pointed out before, it's like to get sign off on something or to ensure that it's the right move. You want some tangible data to kind of explore any avenue, but at the same time, you're wanting to move as quickly as possible to have some impact and some change, and to see those numbers come in. But not every decision's the right decision. You've got to fail to succeed sometimes.
But don't fail in a massive.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's very mixed. Again, depending on size of that company and how willing they are to kind of to drop things and run and change. But
it is a bit of a balancing act, really.
That's
isn't
it.
Like you say, fail fast and quick, but you need to limit how big the impact of that failure is, because like we talked about earlier, you can't afford to lose customers. You just can't. That's the kind of hard fact. So, if it's sort of smallish ones that you can fix quickly, or you can limit the impact from, fine. I'd kind of like to see a bit of a hybrid between the two. Is do the right planning, do the testing like you mentioned, but get it out quick and be testing constantly and kind of refining it all the time. That would be the ideal. And some companies do that. Yeah. Just not everybody.
Not everybody.
Did you find yourself like running multiple split tests, or was that something you explored yourself?
Yeah, so actually Furniture Land is probably one of the more mature places for a way of testing, actually. And we moved to a new software called Evolve AI. which gives you the ability to test much, much quicker and more complex tests, actually. So instead of testing, say, 3 variations, for example, you can test different items on the page. So what it will do is it'll test them in isolation, then start to build combinations until you've got run, kind of hundreds or thousands of tests within a test. And then it will tell you exactly, what's the best combination, but it does it much, much quicker. So you could do all of that within 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, based on having the enough traffic, but having that as opposed to here's 3 variations and that's the winning one, but then we're now going to do variations of that. You kind of all do it in one massive, great big pile of testing. It's an amazing piece of kit, and I'm glad we moved to it. It does take a bit of getting used to because it's a very different way of testing, and obviously communicating that out to the business can be difficult because they're used to a certain way of doing things. But yeah, I mean, being able to do that so quickly is insane.
And did Oak Furniture Land test a lot? Was it everything they were doing, or because we see quite a split with our merchant base? Some things are like they know in their heart they think it's going to be a lot better, so they'll just roll it out. Whereas other things are like, oh, we're a bit split on this. Let's definitely run a test on it.
Yeah, we tested quite a lot of stuff. I mean, even just, sometimes really small things like changing the colour of a button very slightly, making it a bit darker and bolding the text on it, which caused a few disagreements with the brand team because it was obviously a slightly different colour to the brand palette. But actually for, accessibility, it was, even for people that didn't have, any kind of visual issues, you look at it and you go, oh, okay, exactly, I know what I'm doing with that one. Click it, great, fantastic. So, yeah, and obviously that, then means you have to work with other areas of the business. But that's a good thing, surely. Yeah,
definitely. I think it's hard, isn't it? I have a little suspicion in this topic is that when we put our bias on what we're rolling out, I think that's a problem because the amount of times that people are wrong in their bias, even us, right, who are immersed in testing all the time, I always think, well, maybe it's the ones you're so confident are going to be better. They're the ones we need to be testing because actually they really might not be. And I guess it does, I guess, the scale of work as well, doesn't it? If you're redoing a real significant piece of the site, maybe you need to redo it anyway because you had loads of customer feedback that it's terrible, but then you start running new tests on the new version, kind of taking a slightly more data-centric approach whilst confirming what you already believe. E-commerce is hard. And sometimes you have to trust your gut. But if you want to be the next True Classic, your gut won't cut it. And that's where Triple Whale comes in. Triple Whale makes profitable growth simple and helps you understand who your customers are, where they've come from, what they've purchased, and how much they've cost. Triple Whale is an analytics and attribution tool trusted by more than 10,000 brands on Shopify. Still not sure that Triple Whale's for you? Get started for free today with Trends by Triple Whale. This brand new benchmarks tool lets you measure Google, Meta, and TikTok ad performance against friends and enemies alike. Say no to your gut and say yes to better data. Explore the free Trends app today at triplewhale.com/ecommerce trends. Now, we spoke a little bit about failure. And, your view on kind of limiting failure, but, we've got to fail to understand what's working and what's not. So, Jaime, what is your biggest failure over the last 27 years or maybe some real squeaky bum moments you have been like, fuck, everything is going to shit right now?
I can tell you about a squeaky bum moment.
Let's have those squeaky bum moments.
So, this was years ago. It was like 2002 maybe. And I worked for Book Club Associates. Now, they were based in Greater London House, the big one opposite Mornington Crescent. Yeah. I think ASOS live there now. And somebody, I don't know who, had forgotten that the latest Harry Potter book was coming out. It must have been one of the early ones because it certainly wasn't the first one. And I don't know how you can forget this. But they came down about 2:00 and they're like, I need to get an email out, like a pre-order email. I'm like, yeah, fine, when do you want it? Today. Who to? Yeah, like all our club members. Right, okay. So between me, the data team, our designer, and a couple of other people, we literally had to pull all the data, obviously, you know, people who we had permission to mail, design up all the new templates for it, write the copy, get everything built, tested, proofed, everything out that night. And I think by the time I hit send at about 8 o'clock that evening, when I was supposed to be on my way back to Portsmouth to go home for the weekend, that was literally, I'm like, people come back and go, oh, can you just change this? I'm like, but I've got to change that on 20 different emails for 20 different clubs. Yeah, but we need to change it. I'm like, come on.
I want to go to bed.
Yeah, well, I want to go home. Come on. I mean, that thankfully, the email was really successful and we did get, you know, I can't even remember how many it was, but it was a lot of pre-orders. We generated a lot of money. So it was worth doing. But don't come down to me at 2 o'clock on that Friday afternoon. Come on. Particularly all the people that had to be involved, you know, kind of, can you pull the data for me? Like, can you design this email? I've then got to build it in HTML, and this was in, what was DoubleClick before it? I mean, this was how long ago it was. It was whoever did the email system at that time that ended up being DoubleClick or something.
Right.
Maybe it even was them.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit. And do you know what we got as a thank you? A copy of the book. Thanks.
I mean, you can't drink a book, can you? Like?
No, you can't spend it either. But yeah, I was a bit like, no.
How did they forget? Honestly, I remember there being like queues outside Sainsbury's to get the book.
All over the news globally, like people knew about it coming out. So
I don't know who forgot about that or to tell us, but it's probably like I didn't find out who they were because they would not have been my favourite person at that point.
That's the beauty of big business. So you don't know who it was, so you don't get to throttle them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they were part of the Bertelsmann Group, so they were pretty big. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're even still going now, to be honest, but those were the days.
So we
Before I drank gin.
That was the start of the gin.
No, that came a long time after. Long time.
So, lastminute.com requests to get emails out in terms of acquiring existing customers or retaining customers that bought from you before. Mm-hmm. Now, throughout your extensive career in marketing, in terms of acquiring new customers, it's hard getting new customers, right? And I'm sure it probably was 27 years ago, and it still bloody is now.
Yeah.
But what kind of changes have you seen in your career, Jamie?
Social media.
Really?
I mean, you know, people are finding new customers, engaging them in a different way through social media. I mean, people buy on TikTok, it's not high value stuff generally. But, you know, people watch someone doing their hair or makeup or whatever, and they click, buy it, great, lovely. It's there the next day. And none of that really existed. Like, you didn't buy things through Facebook or, kind of link through any kind of social media. That just didn't happen back then.
What were like the key campaign types that you would always go to pre the digital kind of growth of socials?
Yeah, it was always things like, obviously, you know, paid search was still around then. Affiliates, email. I mean, that was back when you actually would buy an email list. And I mean, that just generally doesn't happen much anymore. I'm not even sure if you can do it now. But,
I get about 300 emails, people trying to sell me them every day, but I'm sure they're probably mega dodge.
We used to do a sort of partnership. So, you know, we'd kind of partner up with another company and send an email to them, and then in return, you know, we'd send something out to our email list with their details on, saying, you know, here's a special offer.
Was like PR and out of home quite really like magazine pushes and newspaper pushes?
Yeah, it was still quite big. Yeah, I mean out of home's kind of still ticking along.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, you know, still the same kind of stuff. We just use it slightly differently. TV, radio, direct mail. Remember that?
I don't.
Which came back.
My mum used to love
very
the
successful
Avon
again,
catalogue.
apparently. Oh yeah, my sister does Avon. She's got a nice customer base.
There you go.
She looks after them.
Yeah, too right.
Yeah, it would be one of her customers.
Yeah, maybe. Can get some Avon lipstick.
Do you know what? Actually, everyone jokes about Avon, but actually some of their products are really good.
And this is when you whip out your Avon bag that you brought in today, is that right?
Where do I sign?
I've just got a lot of the shower gel and hand wash because it's good. It works. Wash your hands, job done.
So when social media started really showing its face in marketing, what was like the view of like boards and so on? Was everybody like, we need to get on this now, or was there quite a bit of pushback and be like, no, this is not going to be a thing?
Just trying to remember that far back, to be honest. I think everyone's kind of a bit like, well, let's just see how it goes and maybe we'll try it. And, kind of, then they sort of started to do a bit of, paid social on Facebook and it seemed to do okay. And now it's just everyone thinks you have to do it, which, to be fair, you probably have to now.
Do you think there were people believed in social media in the early days, like more traditional board structures?
In terms of selling things on it? Probably not, no. I mean, it did seem a very weird concept. If anybody actually remembers MySpace.
I love MySpace.
But I think there's still an element of that today with a certain, age group and demographic that still don't believe in...
Also, it depends on what your product is you're trying to sell, I guess. If it's not... I mean, you don't sell insurance on Facebook. Well, you might do. I don't know. But
I get very many dog insurance.
I wouldn't put it past them today.
Yeah, but it's not a typical product that you would think to buy on there, is it? No. It's probably more clothing or makeup, fashion, skincare or whatever. But you might buy dog clothes.
Do you know what? I actually want to get him some more jumpers.
I'm pretty sure my sister's been talked into this by Facebook ads, maybe.
I know. The minute you start, that's it. They start showing you all the other brands, and you're like, I'm in now. That's it.
Trouble is, because she sent it to me, and I click it, and I now get them as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
You do actually get your friends' interest, don't you? I've seen that before. That's why everyone thinks that Facebook listens to you, when it's actually that it just knows who your friends are, and then when they're looking at something, it'll give it a go on you as well.
I get some weird stuff targeted to me, and I'm like, I don't know who you're actually targeting here, because that's not anything to do with me.
And talking about like touch points with customers then, in terms of, traditionally it was like pick your targets, retargeting on social accounts. It's a lot harder now, right, with the privacy impacts to the way we can target customers.
Yeah.
How important, Jaime, do you think that CRM is in an e-commerce strategy itself?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't know if it's still true, but it was always said that keeping a customer is cheaper than acquiring a customer. I don't actually know if that is still the case. I saw some stuff recently that said it's not. I didn't read too much into it, enough time. But if you've already got a customer that's, engaged with you, listening to you, surely it is easier to get them to buy something else. Because also, you've got their history of what they've bought from you. And particularly, obviously, in fashion, if they've bought, I don't know, a particular top or something, you can suggest something that might go with that. Like, oh, we know you bought this. Hope you're loving it. Here's some trousers. Here's a skirt. Here's some shoes. Whatever that might look nice with it. Or you can, if you want to be a little bit more responsible, you can show them how they might style it with things they already own. And here's also some stuff that you could buy from us. So you're not trying to force them to buy things, because so much stuff goes into waste these days, doesn't it? So, yeah, I suppose you've got to be kind of ethical at the same time.
Interesting that you bring up sustainability, because it's like there's a lot of greenwashing going on right now.
Yep.
And I think smaller companies, it might be, I have no data about this stuff, it might be easier to be more sustainable because we're not doing things on global scales. But as soon as we start getting to the size of people like Monsoon and Accessorize or Oak Furniture Land, once we get to that enterprise level of a business, sustainability becomes a real challenge, right? Like we hear Coca-Cola always talking about their pledges to recycle X number of cans and so on. Was sustainability kind of big in your previous roles in e-commerce? What's your view on that enterprise kind of goggles?
It started to kind of creep in while I was at Oak Furniture Land, really. Obviously, they are very much oak wood, so it's how do you get that supply of wood from, some kind of sustainable forest? Do you do some kind of strategy where for every tree you cut down, you plant one? And also, I suppose in a way it is a bit easier because that product is going to last you a long time. You're not going to replace your sofa after 2 years. Well, unless your kids have trashed it, maybe. But, it's a little bit different with, I don't know, maybe shoes, for example, because if you're going to wear them quite frequently, you're going to wear through them quite quickly, potentially. And I know I went to an event recently where Grenson were there, and actually they do something similar to what Birkenstock do, where they'll resole or, fix your shoes for you. And, obviously both Birkenstocks replaced like the cork beds and all sorts of other things. So offering that service, I think is really good. I guess, I don't know how you find out whether the materials they're using are sustainable or whatever, but I suppose with a bit of digging you could find that kind of stuff out.
Yeah, I think it's hard as consumers, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
I find it really difficult to actually know that they're like, people are telling me something. They're like, we use this type of material and we're having it made in this country. I'm like, okay, like it means nothing to me.
Yeah. If you think about it though, if you buy something that's made in this country, ideally what it's made of has been sourced in this country, so there's no shipping cost to get it from wherever,
already a lot more
even Europe.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of like talk about everything needs to be made in Portugal now because it's more ethical, and it's like, I don't know that. It might be amazing. I'm sure people watching this are like, Nick, shut up. It definitely is. But just from your average consumer, I think, well, if you're telling me it's better, I'm believing you it is. But I'm also a little bit skeptical because I know, the big business in the history of big business has not always been the most ethical.
It is tricky. I mean, you were talking about, how can you go from sort of small business? I think it might be easier and more difficult to an extent because it might be good that they can find a supplier or for part of the product, for example, but then when they want to grow, how can you do that but still use that supplier, or do you have to then bring in others? I mean, there's a couple of brands that I've bought stuff from. So there's a lady called Ray, FWP by Ray. Her t-shirts, they are all like ethically sourced cotton. I think she gets them from India, and like she has relationships with the manufacturers and the guys that run the factories to make sure that all the people in the factory get paid well. Our t-shirts are like 35 quid, so they're not cheap, but they are good quality. They are unusual. She gets them over here and often gets them printed or whatever here. She designs it all herself. And then you've got Kemi Telford, who some of her stuff uses offcuts. Again, she's got specific suppliers. I think some of them are in like Africa, like Nigeria and things like that. But hers is kind of real statement pieces. And again, it's not cheap, but you get good quality stuff, and the kind of the sort of trail from where did it come from to get to you. And again, both companies give you great service. I mean, they're both on social media, and actually Yvonne at Kemi Telford, she shows you like her visiting the suppliers. She does a lot of stuff herself, like sometimes she gets her kids in to help her pack her orders and things. But they also do things like, we're shutting down for this period because we're going off on holiday. We're looking after our mental health, all that kind of stuff. But when they come to scale up and become, maybe like H&M, Monsoon, how do they do it? Or do they even want to get that big? I don't know. I mean, I know Kemi Telford did something in John Lewis. They had a range in there. I think they did something with the Tate Modern maybe as well.
So, Jamie, do you think big brands like H&M, Monsoon, Accessorize actually care about an ethical supply chain, or is it all greenwashing?
I think you'll find there'll be people in the business that do. Whether the whole business does, I don't know. I guess it depends on the individuals that work there. I mean, I know some people that like recycle practically everything they use. And others, you know, my neighbours 2 doors down, for example, they just chuck everything in the normal bin. You know, so what do they do in their jobs? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, certainly when I was at Monsoon, there was a big thing for certain ranges where you could actually get the history of that garment, for example, and they would, you know, publish it on the website as part of the story of that that individual piece. I mean, H&M is apparently becoming more eco-conscious, recycled fabrics, etc.
It's so hard to know, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm not sure is how far you can track it back to an actual individual supplier. Yeah. I mean, obviously, some of it you can. And also, I guess you could do a Freedom of Information Act request to them, couldn't you?
The thing is when a company becomes so big on such a huge scale, it is like a science to even be able to understand that impact, isn't it? And I think you probably ask like 200 different consultants or strategists or people that could really look into this stuff, and they'd probably all give you a slightly different answer in terms of whether it's a positive outcome or a negative outcome. And it is really difficult. And I'm not against big business. I don't want to take that stance because ultimately we all need consumables to live our lives,
well,
really.
Hopefully they're paying a lot of tax into the economy,
Hopefully.
That's it. But for that size to be 100%, I think is near impossible.
Yeah. You know, we got...
unless you've done it from the ground up and you've started small and grown that big and kept that kind of ethics as you go. But that must be really difficult.
At some point it must, I'm sure there's elements and periods of time where it be on the edge.
But the reality is the other question is how far do we take it? Because naturally it's probably going to raise prices. Yeah. And then that means that, you know, we're in a cost of living crisis. Yep. That then means that a lot of the population won't be able to afford clothes on their backs and things like that.
Yeah,
you know,
so it's like, you know, all these electric cars, actually, how green are they?
Yeah.
You know, the stuff that goes into making the batteries comes out of the ground. I can't even remember what country it is now. And that's it's not a never-ending source. And actually, disposing of those batteries, how green is that?
I've had a lot of negative press about these batteries.
I don't know.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think we know that fuel is probably... I mean, I'm definitely not a good expert of this kind of stuff, but we know that burning petrol is a terrible idea for the environment. The view I've got on kind of like electric cars is like, well, it's probably not perfect, but it's probably a step towards...
Potentially, yeah.
Hopefully a step towards stop burning fuels, and hopefully we find a better way of doing batteries.
But when I went on French exchange at school, and the buses were running on rapeseed oil. So why can't we do stuff like that? Or the end product of, I don't know, some kind of farming thing. I mean, Honda was doing the hydrogen stuff for a while, and that stopped because apparently it's too expensive to actually get the hydrogen into something that you can use in a car. But it's clean. But is the process to get it into like the battery for the car clean? I don't know.
So Jamie, what advice would you give brands who maybe aren't doing a lot right now to be more sustainable in the way they're operating e-commerce businesses? What advice would you give them? Where would they start?
I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do, like look at your power suppliers. That was actually one thing that we did at Furniture Land, that they did move to like electric supplier that was using purely renewable energy. That's good start. Recycle as much as you can. Look at how do you get your products to, like, your warehouse, for example. How do you get them back out again? I mean, like DPD, for example, they've got electric vehicles now. I know we just talked about how green or not they are, but surely, as we said, it's better than diesel, petrol, whatever. So, you know, maybe the courier that you use or the postal service you use or whatever to get it to your customer is greener. I mean, I went to another event recently there where they were talking about, you know, obviously AI is coming in. It uses up a lot of power and data and things. Look at whoever runs your website servers. Like, are they using renewable energy? Are they trying to be as green as possible? So it's all those kind of little bits within the journey. You know, and obviously if you can use suppliers that are using like recycled materials or ethically sourced stuff. It's not going to be a big bang approach. You can't, because you can't do everything at once. But if you can do little steps here and there to kind of build it all up into a bigger impact, then yeah, absolutely.
I think we've done the sustainability bit, haven't we? We've done that to death now. I think we've really rung home there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an overnight fix.
It's not.
No.
It's not.
It's
and I
never
think,
going to be.
And the information's changing as well, isn't it? Like what we know about the world is forever changing. So it's a challenge, and I feel for brands. I actually do, because we've got commercial targets we've got to hit.
Yeah.
We've got that pressure so that everyone can have food on the table, but at the same time we've got to take it seriously in terms of the impact to the environment but also the other side of kind of like a sustainable supply chain is having an ethical one in terms of the way we're treating humans along that journey.
But every little change that you make has an impact. And I think if everybody did, a few little things here and there and build up to that bigger picture, then we'd be in a better place than we are now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the environment, and what could happen is absolutely terrifying. Yeah,
it is scary. So just kind of going on from that, really, in terms of product development, I'm sure you've been involved in lots of new product launches, marketing them, probably also actually being involved in that development process. What has allowed you in the past to really like cut through the noise and allow you to communicate with large audiences a new product, why it's better? And I'm sure, with some of the big players that you've been competing against in those markets, such as like Furniture Land, Monsoon, Accessorize, there's, so many fashion brands out there, so many jewellery brands out there. What's allowed you, what sort of strategic mindset have you had when you're like, right, this is how we're going to make sure we're standing out and people are seeing us?
Yeah, I think you have to be clear on your USPs. What makes you unique, for example? I know certainly when we were at Furniture Land, they were bringing in kind of additions to things. So like a lifetime frame guarantee. So if anything does go wrong with it, obviously they'll fix it, or if they can't, they'll replace it. The fact that the product is solid oak, unless there were a couple of ranges that weren't, but they did tell you it was something else. And if it was made in the UK, they would tell you that. And just kind of being clear about what's your identity and what makes you unique, or even if it's just something, we're super reliable. Tell people and prove it. You can't just say it.
Did you find any of those USPs changing throughout in terms of like having a product and then having to go, okay, how are we going to stand out? Did that change over time? Like obviously doing, I suppose, research into other brands, industries, and seeing what they're doing and how you can stand out?
Yeah, sometimes it's not even the product. Sometimes it's the surrounding proposition. Like, how do you pay for that? Is it finance? How quickly can we get it to you? What is the delivery charge? Like, is it cheaper than competitors?
I actually love that you bring up like, when I think USPs, I'm always thinking like the really big ones, like, it looks the best or whatever. But actually, you're really right in the sense of actually, there's so many more decisions in that. It's like, how quickly is this going to arrive? When I was buying these sofas for this office, I was like, do they look nice? How quickly are they going to arrive? How much do they cost? Is the brand trustworthy? It's like all of these decision factors.
Now, see, you forgot the things like, does it fit from the door to your room of choice?
Oh, that's Ben's job. He did it.
See, that was one problem we had at Oak Furniture Land, because people would order stuff and then couldn't get it through the door, or they couldn't get it up the stairs. Like, for example, if you've got a triple wardrobe, those things are enormous. And they come in not quite one piece. I mean, the base is one piece, and then the rest of it, that's it. It's one huge piece. And for health and safety, you're not allowed to lift it up and over banisters. So you either have to be able to get it round, or like into a room and then divert it around. And so people just were, having to organise redeliveries or refunds and stuff, because they hadn't thought. They measured it up in the room they wanted it in, but they hadn't actually thought, like, how do we get it from the front door to that room?
I
was going to say, I think historically we've learned that customers don't do their due diligence and learn and read into these things. Then it's what can you do on site?
They do as much as they think about.
Yeah.
But that's not always something that you think, because
No.
you know, sometimes you see it in a shop because you've actually gone into there and you think, yeah, that'll fit, or you've checked the measurements and it will go to my house, but you don't think, actually, how am I going to get it from there to there? I mean, when I was a kid and we bought my parents bought a new sofa, we actually had to take the front window out to get it in. I mean, thankfully,
That
we
is
could
a
do
commitment,
that.
that is.
Yeah, but we actually had to like phone someone up and go, "Can you come out quick?" Because it was a massive sash window, so thankfully we could get it in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, some houses you can't do that,
Yeah.
so it's kind of tough cheese, and you have to send it back or whatever. But you know, and then there's the inconvenience of either just getting a refund and having to go somewhere else to find another product, or arrange a redelivery, or
And I
whatever.
imagine that's
it's
working
it's
for
nuts.
a brand that has those challenges is probably it's really painful when you're getting returning a t-shirt
Yeah.
compared to returning
Well,
a massive bed
also,
frame or whatever.
There's a redelivery fee or a not being able to deliver fee to the customer. So not only if they paid
Or
a lot of
return,
money for a product,
Yeah.
they've then got to have to pay again.
Yeah.
And no one's going to want to do that.
It was like, Ben, when you ordered your sofa, wasn't it? You had like, what was it, the wrong colour turn up then?
Yeah, we had like two-tone, we had all sorts going wrong. And no matter how much information I fed them, they still cocked it up at some point. And it wasn't necessarily the company, it was the delivery company.
'Cause I bet you sent
messed up.
pictures of it and
Oh
said
yeah,
it's not what I
photos,
ordered,
everything,
yeah.
like references to website, colours, all sorts. There was also an issue with like the colour swatch they tried to state was one thing, but they'd messed up on the website. So that was something I had to point out to them that, you know, they'd messed up here. This is the hex code you've referenced versus what I've got. All sorts. Yeah, absolute
Messy.
nightmare.
I think that like pre-purchase education.
But what's your thoughts about that brand now? Would you actually buy something from them
No, I
again?
wouldn't go back because it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And it took 6 months, which, you know, they initially had it in stock. We went for that particular
Yeah.
couch because it was in stock. We knew we'd get it within sort of 5 to 10 working days. So that was kind of the sell on it initially. And
Yeah.
then in the end, it took a total of 6 months to get the end result of what we actually ordered at the beginning.
So if they'd have fixed everything within a week, would you have a completely different...
100%. Yep.
So there you go, there's another
recommend
thing.
it. Yeah.
If something does go wrong, how you deal with it and how you fix it also counts.
Yeah.
Because things do go wrong. Like, you can't
course.
stop them. It's just, how do you deal with it? How quickly and efficiently do you deal with it and fix it when it does go wrong?
I think if you're having, I felt like I worked harder to get there than actually having them kind of come to me and say, okay, let us resolve it for you. It was me having to resolve it for them on my end.
Yeah.
So that's where it's frustrating. But I agree. If
and
you get
that's
that
when you
service
think,
where it's
forget it, I'm not
100%.
interested, you go somewhere else.
And did you see in your previous role, did you work closely with customer service teams to understand where customers were going wrong in your marketing journey of trying to get them to buy your products?
Yeah, we did quite a bit of that actually at Furniture Land. So again, and actually we used the NPS surveys as well.
Yeah.
So we would talk to them, you know, fairly frequently and say, you know, what's the typical questions that are coming through or the problems that you're getting, which was how we found out about the wardrobes. And, you know, we then create a will it fit guide and tell you like what you should do, how you should measure it up. You know, and things really as simple as, you know, take your pictures off the walls, because if that gets wrecked when you're getting it through, like, you don't want it trashed, or, you know, things on shelves, etc. I mean, we did the same for sofas as well, but there was a whole separate project going on around that. But, you know, when we implemented the MPS, which was actually started by another area in the business, but we had our own feedback coming through, you know, here's all the problems we've got. And we also used the Trustpilot feedback as well, where people would say, oh, I had a problem with this, had a problem with that. We would then, you know, thankfully we had Content Square at that time, and we could then loop into some of the like session recordings. So even if we couldn't replicate the problem, we could see what's happening and then say to the development team, like, we can't replicate it, so we can't tell you what's wrong, but here's what happened, and we can look up the timestamp and look up the server logs and say, oh, okay, this is what happened, and then they can fix it. So some of it was, you know, just do it fixes, like get it done. And then some of it we fed into the testing program and say, okay, well, there's a problem here. How do we fix it? Like, what things can we change?
Yeah.
And we do that on a monthly basis, you know, get the reports, see what happened, and then, you know, clear off the biggest issues that month. And then eventually you'd see them kind of gradually disappear as people get used to it, and then you work on the next bunch of, top 5 or whatever that month, the next month.
And hopefully see all your KPIs improve as a result.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously you can see experience is getting better. There's less people complaining about things. I mean, sometimes you actually can attribute it to an increase in revenue. Sometimes you can't, because, people will be researching as well as some people will be actually ready to buy. So, yeah, I mean, it's difficult at that point, but hopefully you also see people dropping out of the cart less often.
Yeah.
Which would be nice.
So, just going back to that kind of like new product launch type marketing campaign, I imagine the budgets on these sorts of brands to launch new product ranges or just the general paid media spend that you're seeing are pretty big compared to maybe smaller brands within the e-commerce world. What are is there any kind of like differences that you've seen in terms of working with like your big mega brands that are spending on paid social and so on? Obviously the budgets probably are going to be bigger. I might be wrong, but I would have guessed they would be bigger. I imagine those decisions, I don't really know what I'm asking here, but I imagine those decisions when you've got like a massive media spend that's just about to go live, as a e-com manager, as a marketing manager, are absolutely terrifying in terms of seeing that performance. Can you share any more of your experience on those moments of your career?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think where I've had like a biggest launch or something. I mean, sometimes it's actually like been a change in the brand identity, for example. I mean, in fact, actually, Furniture Land has just relaunched a new campaign where it's, I think it's actually like a tree, and you go into different rooms within the tree sort of thing, and it's growing your home. Well, it was a very different proposition when I was still there. So, kind of relaunching your brand identity is kind of terrifying, because if it falls flat and doesn't resonate, then what do you do? I mean, you've spent a lot of money coming up with that concept, probably. Then you spent a lot of money on new ads, or you might have even done a whole TV campaign. I mean, who's next on the line?
Is TV dead?
I don't think so yet. I mean, to be honest, I don't watch a lot of telly that's got ads on it. So
because you're paying for all them players, isn't it? You've got your BBC Pro and
I don't do TV.
It is. But also people skip through stuff. I mean, you record. I mean, you've got live TV that you could skip through.
Yeah.
If you record something, you can skip over it. I mean, I mean, when I was younger, I used to watch the ads all the time just because it was fun. It's not so much anymore. I was watching some TV with my parents on the weekends, and I'm like, what even is this?
I know. Some of the
my
ads.
mum's like, I don't understand. What the hell's this?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing at the moment. Do you remember the really good Guinness ads, like the surfers and the horses? There's nothing like that at the moment. Oh, you need to look it up.
I'm going to have to look them up.
I know what you're talking about, yeah. And then also like all those, like where you'd have catchy songs and things, like in Australia you'd have like sunscreen brands that would have all these like gimmicky things that stick with you for years.
It's interesting how little brands, apart from big brands, but like that mid-market brands, they don't leverage TV as much as I think they could do.
It's still quite expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive, but then comparatively to like, I do wonder what the acquisition cost compared to like social is. Of course, you can have smaller budgets, but actually, if a brand's spending 30 grand a month on 40k on paid social, I'd love to be able to see the difference.
Yeah,
for those
but
mid-market.
don't forget, you can track that back to an actual purchase, whereas with TV, you probably can to an extent, but it's much more difficult to attribute it directly to that. And also, like if you wanted to spot in the middle of what's the singing things on ITV? I don't know, whatever. Like 8 o'clock in the evening.
Voice,
Yeah, whatever. Something
it.
like that. It's like 50 grand for 30 seconds. And unless you use kind of maybe some of the satellite channels or whatever, which obviously it's a smaller audience, but it's potentially your target audience if you've done your research right. But also, how many people are going to see it? There's a break. You get up and make a drink
Cup of tea,
or
it's
go to the
interesting.
toilet or
Well, I suppose at that time, if
Right.
you're not running too many other campaigns and there is one particular campaign you run on TV and you
Yeah.
see a spike in, obviously, people visiting your website
Yeah.
as well as sales, that's your only way of
Yeah.
identifying. But you're right, it's
But
difficult
also,
to track
people are
it.
lazy. Don't forget, you know,
Yeah.
they'll see your TV ad and they don't type in your URL. They type in your brand name,
Yeah.
and then they click and cost you on paid search anyway.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I think more brands are getting smarter for a multi-attribution model
Yeah.
in terms of like, are
Yeah.
you there everywhere? Effectively, you know. I think
Yeah.
we had Grind Coffee on the podcast a few episodes back, and they're really about that. Like, we're on the tubes, they've got a TV ad, they've got paid
Yeah.
social running there, all over socials, and so on. You know, it's about that very much that diverse approach to gaining customers. Whereas historically, it was like, let's just put loads of money on Facebook and see what happens.
Yeah.
Whereas I think those times probably are gone. Loki Trainers were just recently on the podcast too, and Ross shared his view on how actually that multi-attribution model is really vital, because you're really putting, you know, when you're doing social now, that's very top of funnel, and you're putting people
Yeah.
into what's when they need those pair of trainers, they're straight on Google, and then
Yeah.
you need to be strong on your SEO so they find you again.
Yep.
So it's that like every touch point.
Yeah, that kind of top, middle, bottom piece. Yeah, I mean, actually at Monsoon they were using Phosphor, which is one of those attribution tools, and trying to get them to adopt it, which they were actually starting to really get into it. So that, I mean, the paid search team, digital marketing team, they obviously understood the benefits of it. But again, it's that communicating out to the business why we should be doing this and why we should be using money and moving it from paid search to paid social, for example, and things like that. It's at the end of the day, it's data, isn't it?
Yeah.
Using data to make the right decisions.
And trial and error internally with those things.
Yeah.
Like, although they may not see the benefit in some areas of the business, but at times it's let's at this period of time invest it there and then see.
Yeah, I mean, it should be informing everything. You know,
Yeah.
if a particular product's not selling and you've got feedback from a customer saying the material's crap, it's a terrible fit, the colour doesn't look right, it's awful, then you need to take that and make sure that you don't make those same mistakes again in the next set of products. Or, you've launched something on the website, for example, a new feature, and it's not quite right. In that case, it's easier. So you go back to the testing and you kind of iterate and make it better and keep improving it, which is obviously much more difficult if you've launched a physical product. I mean, you know, putting a pair of shoes in and none of them sells. I mean, what are you going to do about it? I mean, I suppose, what did Adidas do when it all blew up with Yeezy and Kanye West? They were left with a bunch of product. I never followed that up to see what happened with it all.
Didn't they drop Kanye?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they still had a ton of products, didn't they? So what are they going to do with it? That's like millions.
Probably sold it off to certain, I don't know.
Yeah, I
maybe
can't
it
remember.
was-
Still got an
what they
eBay.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe they did.
People
I
will
don't
still
know.
want them,
But it'll
I
still
guess.
be collectible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You still
And
see
it's still-
Yeezys everywhere, don't you? Everyone wearing
Yeah.
them, and
Yeah, yeah.
No, thanks.
you don't want any. You haven't got
Not
one.
for me.
No.
Not a fan.
So-
No.
The use of data obviously is super important. It's a running theme across every e-com brand we speak with,
Yeah. Or it should be.
or hopefully should be. It's vital, isn't it? You need to know what your customers are doing. You need to know how well your website's performing. What kind of tech have you guys used in your history in terms of
Yep.
that you've really relied on to actually be your go-to?
Yeah, obviously, I mentioned it a couple of times now. Content Square, I wouldn't be without it now. It's almost like Google on steroids to an extent.
So for those that don't know what Content Square is,
Yeah,
can you-
it's user experience analytics. So it will tell you things like rage clicks, how much people have been scrolling, what are they pausing on. It incorporates like screen recordings, so things like you could kind of scrap Hotjar and get Content Square. It will do find and fix. It will tell you about technical errors. You can put sort of levels on it. So if suddenly you've got your cart dropout's gone over a certain threshold, it will send you an alert, and you can go and quickly check what's going on. And it it'll be things like I've got this banner on this page. 99% of people are looking at it, but 0.5% are clicking on it, and it's only generating X amount of money. So you could look at your homepage and see only 50% of people scroll past the first section, and no one's clicking on anything. and it will allow you to kind of change things around and see what's working much quicker. And I believe Very Group, I mean, they're huge, they're like billions of pounds. I believe they use the insights that they got from Content Square to redo their whole website recently.
Interesting. Because it's about getting not just hands-on data, isn't it? Like some of those data tools can be so complex, and really you need to be a data scientist to understand them. I think that's where GA4 is going, to be perfectly honest with you. But actually, just being able to, I always say, you want data platforms that just give you data easily, because most marketing teams are overstretched, super busy. They want to make quick, actionable insights.
Yeah, and that's one thing that Content Square will give you is literally click, click, click. Great, there you go. And it will tell you things like if you were to improve this for even, say, 25% of the customers that got this experience, you could generate X amount more money. So you can put quantifiable numbers to it. I mean, obviously, it is estimates, but they're pretty reliable. So you could say, here's 5 use cases. What happens if we change these for the people that had a bad experience? It will give you X amount more money per month, week, year, that kind of stuff. And then it will allow you to kind of prioritise which changes you make first. And then obviously you can validate it afterwards. So you make the change and you see, yes, it worked, great, this is what we've got. Or no, it was a complete flop. Or, I mean, we actually looped it into our CRO testing at Furniture Land. So not only do you validate that it's fixed what you were trying to fix, but you make sure that you didn't break something somewhere else. And it will also allow you to kind of dig around and find other problem areas that you maybe didn't know about, that again, you can then feed into your testing program to, continue that cycle of improvement. So yeah, I wouldn't be without it now.
So Jaime, what sort of platforms, in your experience, were the brands that you work for using?
So Oak Furniture Land had their own kind of in-house system, which had kind of evolved over time. So the guy that started the company, basically, I think he was like the biggest seller of furniture on eBay at one point, and then kind of moved into actual retail stores, started his own website and stuff. So they built that from scratch and just kind of evolved it over time. And it was starting to creak a little bit by the time I went. I believe since then they're actually going to re-platform, but I don't know what to. Used Salesforce a couple of times.
What was your experience with Salesforce like?
I mean, it does the job, but I wouldn't say it's the easiest tool to use. I used Magento way back when, like 1 million years ago. And
it's probably not changed a lot since then.
That was one of the weirdest systems ever. You'd almost have to start at the end result and kind of work backwards, which never made any sense to me at all. It was not logical.
Do you have a preference of tech platform for a real scale business?
Not really. I mean, you kind of need to buy or, I don't know, subscribe to whatever works best for your business at that time. I do like the idea of, headless composable, because you can take all the best bits and kind of put it all together and link it up. Obviously, you need to have a bit of cash for that because it's not cheap.
Do you think that's the future of where e-commerce is going?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies out there that specialise in one particular thing. There are some, kind of like Bloomreach, for example, they're moving into multiple areas. But yeah, I think if you are in the fortunate position where you can pick and choose the best bits that work best for your business and, bolt them all together, then happy days. But not everyone's in that position, sadly.
It's hard, isn't it? I think headless, personally, I think it's, for most businesses, it's too expensive and it's too slow to do things. But it is fast, but it's just difficult to roll out. But I think as more like tech partners adopt headless commerce, to have a similar type ecosystem that we're seeing in the world of Shopify, I think maybe then we might start seeing companies run with it. But then that said, we are seeing those enterprise level businesses really adopting it. So
it depends on what kind of APIs and things are available, and then you can use that sort of middleware like MuleSoft and things like that, and just kind of plug and play. It can still be tricky, but it's getting easier. Everything evolves over time, doesn't it, to become easier, ideally. So, I think it will start to move more towards that. Just how quickly is the question, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the last kind of area that I would love to talk to you about, Jaime, is about kind of like team and culture.
Yeah.
You work with some massive companies that have huge numbers of teams and employees.
Yep.
What do you think the secret ingredient for growing a large company while still maintaining that culture is?
I think, one of the best teams that I've worked with was the team at Avis. Which was a funny setup, because when I joined, a lot of the team was actually contractors, because we were doing a replatforming. So they'd come in to work on that project, and towards the end of my time, there was sort of gradually, kind of coming off the project and disappearing. But it was a real mix of cultures. Obviously we were focusing on the EMEA region, but in my team in particular, I had some Germans, Spanish, Italian, French. There were some Dutch people, someone from the Czech Republic. In fact, actually, one of the French speakers was originally from Mali, I think. And we used to do things like have a kind of culture lunch. So everybody would make their own speciality dish or whatever and bring it in, and everyone would just take a bit and have a little chit chat round, and it was really good. But I think probably the thing that held everybody together was the leader of the team, so Sandrine. She just had this way of bringing everyone together. And I think also the people themselves, because everyone was quite, open-minded and brought a lot of experience from all sorts of different places, it just seemed to work really well. I've, worked in places where teams like that just completely didn't gel at all. We used to have quarterly team meetings. The morning would be spent everyone updating from their own areas. This is what we've been doing, here's what it's done. And then the afternoon we'd just do like some crazy activities. So one time we learnt the hacker, which was crazy. We did a world record attempt, which was a complete and utter flop.
What was the attempt?
To get, I forget how long it was, like 2 minutes or something, and you had to get as many paper aeroplanes into this bin container as possible. But honestly, it was so strict. It's like the guy from Guinness Records came in, he went off to get changed, put his thing on, and it was all clipboards and paperwork and measuring out how far away you were and timers, and you're only allowed to do 3 attempts. And so we spent ages all in our little groups crafting these aeroplanes, testing them out. And then it was like, right, everyone get round. We're all going to throw them. It's like, no, don't do all at the same time. So it's like, we'll go one, like all around. And then we discovered that actually there was about 4 or 5 of us that were really good at chucking them in there. And it was like, right, everyone just pile them all around them and like chuck, keep going. And we did quite well on one of them. But yeah, it was just utter chaos. We did like a sort of treasure hunt thing. But you did the treasure hunt to earn credits, which you could then spend a little shop to get these craft supplies to make a car thing that had to go as far as possible. And all these kind of things that were designed to, they were fun, but it's designed to help with collaboration and communication and all that kind of stuff. And we would do that thing regularly. I
think it really brings people together. Like we did a sports day, and it just like redevelops those like relationships that you need to have.
Yeah.
For your day-to-day work.
I think you have to try lots of different things, because obviously not everyone's going to be sporty or whatever. And an agency I worked with, they had they had a board game day, so it covered all sorts of different games and stuff. And sometimes they have a sports day in the summer and things, but so everyone's included, and you're not forcing people to do things they don't want to do. And
I'm
stuff
terrible
like that.
for doing that. I'm like, come on, let's go.
Yeah, I'm really competitive.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is.
You mentioned that you'd been in teams where, you know, you just didn't gel, or the kind of team structure was the culture wasn't there.
Yeah.
What do you think the reason is why some businesses just fail to grasp a strong and positive and progressive culture?
I think sometimes they just don't spend enough time on it. You know, like I say, at Avis, we did those team days fairly regularly. And other places, they're like, no, we haven't got time for that. I mean, okay, we took a whole day out, and that was the whole team, you know, 70 people out doing something for the whole day. I mean, obviously, people were contactable if necessary, and, you know, a handful of people were the designated contact in case something went wrong or needed attention. But otherwise, the focus was on that day and nothing else. But yeah, I mean, I've worked in companies where they're like, no, it's a waste of time. Okay, so we'll all just go out for a drink ourselves then and build our own little culture. Yeah, I'm not saying obviously you have to take a whole day off to do it, but, you know, putting aside time in work time to do it, because everybody's got different commitments. You know, people have got kids they've got to get back to, or, you know, whatever. And they can't always spend time of an evening, or maybe don't want to. You know, some people like to keep work and personal completely separate, but that doesn't mean you can't do something during the day that, you know, builds a good working culture within the team. I mean, you're not going to like everybody you work with. It's never going to happen.
No.
But as long as you can work with them, it doesn't matter.
It's true.
I mean, there's people I've worked with that I literally couldn't stand to look at them sometimes. But I'm not naming any names because that's rude. But I could work really well with them, you know, because we had enough respect for each other that, you know, even if we disagreed, it would be, you know, we'd have that conversation and eventually come to some kind of compromise. You've just got to be adult about it, really.
And do you think culture starts at like the management level, or do you think it really is everybody's responsibility to drive a culture within a business?
Yeah, I think it's everybody to an extent. I mean, you know, the kind of base culture needs to be probably driven by the top of the business. But yeah, I mean, you kind of customise it to fit your team. You know, there'll be a set of brand values or whatever that, you know, need to be kind of adhered to within the business, but you'll change them to, not completely change them, but you'll tweak them to fit, you know, your team, because, you know, the guys that work in the warehouse lifting and shifting things or packing things up, they'll have a very different culture to an office-based team, for example. But that doesn't mean you can't build some kind of relationship with them.
It's true.
You know, I was at FatFace when I was working on the US business. When I discovered that some of the transactions were fraudulent, I actually worked really closely with them because, you know, on a weekend I wasn't working. So it was like, if you saw anything that looks like this or it's a bit suspicious, just hold on to it. And then we'll check it, you know, come Monday. And then if it's fine, just post it out. But, you know, kind of worked with them to say, look, anything that looks dodgy, just hang on to it. You know, and also then working with the finance teams as well to kind of tighten up the fraud rules in Adyen and things. You know, that's three completely separate teams that, you know, probably don't really have a lot in common other than I'm taking the orders, they're sending something out, and they're making sure the money comes into the business. That's the only common thread. Otherwise, I probably would never have spoken to them. I'm not going to just pop down to the warehouse and go, oh, hi, guys, all right.
Want to chat?
They've
Want
got
a coffee?
job. Yeah, they've got jobs to do, and, you know, so would I. So, but, yeah, you know, you've got to have some kind of common theme, at least, to everybody to be working towards.
It's true. It's true. Well, look, Jaime, thank you so much for joining us on CharleChats, the Ecommerce Podcast. It's been absolutely fabulous to have you both on the sofa, and Monty has slowly got closer and closer to me throughout this episode.
I was hoping Monty would come and sit here and just be like Dr. Evil.
I know, just keep moving. Well, look, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you.
No, thank you.
And we wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. 27 years in marketing and e-commerce. I absolutely love learning about how the times are changing so fast. thank you so much for tuning in to CharleChats, the e-commerce podcast. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, head over to our website, and we'll be back again real soon.